All right, so it's been a few months. At this point, we're gonna want to split the stave here. I'm gonna try and get 2 bows out of this one stave. Now, one thing you're looking for is curves. You usually don't want a lot of reflex and deflex. It's better if it curves from side to side. And that's just my personal opinion. Now, when I make my bow, I can look down this and see that right here is pretty well in line with the other end. And also, this is a pretty tall stave, so I'm gonna end up cutting some off of this. So I'm gonna leave it this length until I get a better understanding of what my bow is gonna look like. Also, you wanna look at knots. Like this is the only major knot on this stave here. And so we could have that right in the middle of a limb, and that would look kind of cool. But also we could turn it to the side, and that knot would be gone completely. Got a few pin knots here, and that's not a big deal though. All right, so to split a stave like this, we need just a few tools. You're gonna want 2 wedges, and apparently you can actually make them out of wood, but these metal wedges will be fine. And then I like to use just a regular hammer, just because I can go a lot slower with a regular hammer as opposed to a sledgehammer. All right, so I decided to split it where it has this knot right here. I think if you split it from the middle on the small side, it's more likely to go all the way through to the thick side. So once you split it, it's very hard to unsplit. Uh-oh, that's not splitting like I want. You want to make sure you're splitting straight toward the center. Otherwise, it's splitting off to the side, and that is not good. So I had to correct that real quick. All right, that looks like it's splitting pretty straight, so that's exciting. Once that one's in pretty well, I can go ahead and start hammering this one in, and then that one falls out. And then you just hop these over. Now, you can actually split it right after you cut it. And for most woods, I would actually do that, especially if it's a much larger diameter. But I waited, and you can even split it before you take the bark off. And that's actually a good idea, especially with bigger diameter staves, because that way there's not much chance to ruin the back of the bow by nicking it with a hammer or something. Alright, so at this point, it's pretty much all the way split through. But because of the twist, there's grain attaching this side to this side. So basically, I'm just gonna tear it apart as best I can. Alright, so now that we have our stave split out and stuff, we kind of just want to inspect it. Notice any wobbles or any dips or anything in the grain here. Also, I've got this knot right here, and so that's going to be something I'm going to need to consider. There's also a few pin knots here and there. I can pretty much ignore those. Now, ideally with a bigger knot like this, I'd want to go just completely around it, but it is in like the center of the stave, and I might have enough room to go around it here, but I don't feel very confident with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave the knot right in the center of the limb. Again, the back of the bow is very important. We don't want to gash that or have any damage to the back of the bow. I don't want my bow to be quite this long, because that's more wood than I need to be carrying around. So I'm going to shorten it down a little bit, and I think down to about here. I think that's going to be good. And to be honest, like, you can make really short bows and you can make really long bows, and they're both going to work pretty well. But with the longer bow, you're going to be putting less stress on the wood, because it can work through a longer piece, but then you're carrying around more wood than you need to be carrying around. So I generally like my bows a little bit on the short side, so I'm going to cut it off, yeah, just about right here. I think it'll be fine. The length of your bow is going to have to do with how far you're going to draw it. My draw is only about 22 inches, which is considered really short. And so but if you have a longer draw, definitely keep your stave longer. And remember, you can always take wood off of the bow, but you can never put it back. Now this is the roughing it out stage. So basically you have to take off a lot of meat, and you want to get your bow close well, you want to get your stave looking like a bow. It's just a lot of hatcheting and taking wood off. Now with this knot right here, it's a little bit off the center. As you can see, it's off on this side. So what I'll do is I'll take off wood on this side here until it's about even, and then I can slowly take off wood from either side until I get the width of the limb that I want. Take off some wood real quick on that side just to get things evened out. Also, it's important to be careful of where your grain is going, because you can hit in the wood and then it'll strip off like this, and then it'll just like go weird places. So you don't want something that's going to go and damage your back. And if you have a straight stave that doesn't have any twists, you don't have to worry about that. Otherwise, you're just going to want to keep an eye on what the grain is doing, and when you start hitting it, how it's going to split off. Alright, so working on these staves, of course, you don't want to be like roughing it out down here and then hitting your hatchet into the concrete. And if you do this on like the grass or on normal earth, you're gonna end up actually forcing your stave down into the ground, and you're gonna be roughing out this part, and then all of a sudden you realize your stave is a few inches into the ground. And so that's why I do it up here, and I like to do it on a piece of wood like this. That way, as I'm hitting it, there's not a lot of shot going in it, because the wood here is acting as a little bit of a cushion. Also, in this piece of wood, there's a little hole drilled into it, and it just goes down like maybe a quarter or half an inch, and that kind of gives me an idea of how wide I want my tips to be. Because by the end, I want my tips to be about as wide as my thumb, but with this, I can just get it down, and once it's down to that width, I can leave it until I do the finishing touches later on. Alright, so I got my staves roughed out, and it's at basic dimensions. Of course, as you can see, I mean, it's really rough looking, a lot of tool marks and stuff in it. So this is when we bring out the wood rasp. And what I like about this one is it has a really, really rough side and then a much finer side. So I can take off a lot of wood with this side, and then as I need to do smaller corrections, I can use the smaller side that won't take off nearly as much wood. Alright, so we're starting to get some bend in it. Not much at all, but there's a little bit of flex in it. When I start getting some flex in it like that, that's when I like to pull out the wood rasp. Alright, so what I like to do at this point with the wood rasp is I like to get things squared away, where there's just like a lot of grain tear off and stuff, and just hack marks from the hatchet. I like to just smooth out the whole thing and bring things down. Like right here, we had some grain tear out, and so I'm just going to bring the wood down to that, and so that it's not very apparent anymore. I want to make sure like it's still not bending much. That's really important, because once you get it bending, you want to go really slow. So I'm just going to kind of even out the whole thing here, and I'm going to be using the side that's going to be taking off the most wood here. Now what I'm looking for is when I run my hand down the length of the bow, I want to feel a pretty even consistency of width here, so that along the whole bow, as the back of the bow kind of curves in and out, I want that to follow along the belly. So as I rub my hands down the length of it, if I feel it getting thicker or thinner, I'm going to want to make note and kind of just shade that down a little bit. And it doesn't have to be exact at this point, but it needs to be close. Now one thing I found that is kind of an issue on this bow is right here we've got some like pretty heavy grain tear out, and that goes in pretty deep, and there's just a knot right there, and just some nasty things happen. And this happened when I was splitting it. So there's nothing you can really do to avoid this, but basically what I'm going to do is, at this point it's not as narrow as as the final dimensions. So this spot right here where that grain tear out is, I'm going to leave that nice and wide, and I'm not going to narrow that down anymore at all. because this is just going to be kind of a weak point on the bow, and I just want to be real careful. And at this point, I don't want it bending much at all. So if I go ahead and bend the bow, I can feel some flex, and actually most of the flex is right in here, and there's some that's pretty even throughout the rest of the bow. But yeah, that's going to be a problem spot, but we're just going to leave it nice and thick for now, and then we may take off some more wood later, but that's going to be one of the final areas we're going to touch up just because of that grain tear out. And we'll see how it affects the bow. Otherwise, of course, I have that other split if it just completely wrecks this bow. But I don't think it will. I think we can get a good bow out of this still. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my rasp and I'm going to get it down to the width dimensions that I want. It's still a little bit thick. So basically what I like to do is I like to start at the tip here, bring it down to about the width of my thumb, and then just kind of narrow it down and taper it down to the handle from there. As I do that, of course, I'm going to need to be careful of this run out part. I don't want to narrow this anymore. Also, where there's a knot right here, I'm probably going to leave that a little bit wider until later on. But for the first thing I'm going to do is just start taking wood off of the tips. And I'm going to try and make these quite a bit more narrow. But remember, you want the back of the bow to be pristine. Well, that's it for this video. We went from a stave all the way to the basic shape of the bow. And so in the next video, part 3, we'll be covering how to tiller the bow. And then of course, after we're done with the bow, I'll go out and shoot it and see how it shoots. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe for more videos relating to primitive archery, primitive stuff, and just nature in general. Also, I've got some wildlife and more adventure and nature videos over at Animal Bites TV. You can check that out right here. I got a link for you. And you'll be able to see some local wildlife and also some exotic stuff from South Florida. Now, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I will get a notification straight to my phone, and I'll be able to answer any questions you have. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, find a new way to appreciate nature.